Hello and welcome to the video. Playing Offstage is arguably one of the most exciting aspects of the game. You can get clips and gimps on your opponents to secure early stocks. However, the same can happen to you. Perhaps you're familiar with the esports scene and you like to watch the pro players. Often their offstage engagements are high octane and they seem to be able to do the impossible. They manage to survive out there for extended periods of time without getting back to stage. They can get back from seemingly impossible situations and can even turn an edgeguard around into getting a KO. However, what happens when you try and do the same? Well, we've all been there, haven't we? We get hit once, probably in yellow health. The weapon throw hits you, the sweat beads come out, and suddenly your stock is just gone. And then the player who otherwise wouldn't have beaten you is then taunting just because they know how to use hammer recovery. Well, it's not a good feeling, is it? And maybe this describes your experience off stage. Maybe you find yourself thinking, if only I played that better. Well, if this is you and you want to know the secrets to playing off stage like the pros do, you're in the right place, my friend, because in today's video we're going to be going over all of the tips and tricks to level up your offstage game. We're going to be covering all of your options, when and when not to use them, how to get back to stage when all seems to be lost, and how to turn the edgeguard around so that you can own the offstage. But we're not just going to be taking my word for it, because this video will also feature some pro play analysis, so stay tuned. So, to start off the video, what we're going to do is first have a look at what options you actually have available to use. So later on in the video we will be discussing when to and also when not to use options, but it's first important to know what they actually are. So from the stage, you have 1, 2, 3 jumps, and then you can't do any more. But what you'll notice from playing is, as well as 3, you can do a recovery as well. Now, why do I make note of that? Well, you might not know that a recovery is actually a type of jump, and the game recognizes that as taking a jump away. So what you actually have is 4, and now I can't jump or recover again. But those 4 don't have to just be 3 jumps and a single recovery. You can actually choose how to use them how you like. The important detail is that you can never do more than 3 of one thing. But I can use those 4 in any way I like, so I could do jump, recovery, 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 right? With recovery you can't spam it though, because it is also an attack, and because of that there is some delay between being able to do it. So why am I telling you this? After all, you want to play out here. That's the very reason why you clicked on this video. Well, there's an important detail that happens when you go off stage that you're going to need to be aware of. Just watch this. So if I walk off the stage, I then have 1, 2, and then I only have 2 jumps. Hold on, I thought you just said you have 3 plus a recovery. But here I have 1, 2, not 3. I can do another recovery, but I only have 2 jumps. Well, the reason that is because falling off the side like this actually counts as a jump. Same as just falling off the wall, that counts as a jump. You saw there I fell off the wall, did 2 jumps and a recovery, and that's all I could do. So the game counts walking off the side or falling off the wall as a jump, even though you aren't pressing the jump key. So that is going to be an important detail to just make note of, just so that you aren't running out of options when you think you've got another jump. So another option that you have is a directional dodge. It's going to be quite useful to use this in an upwards or diagonally upwards direction to make it kind of like another jump. So I've kept this one separate as an option just because it doesn't work on the same system as the jumps and recoveries. It is a completely different system. So just some things you want to keep in mind. Dodge is on a cooldown. I think it's about 3 seconds, so if you actually time it right, you do it early, you can do it twice before you land on the ground again. Very often you'll see people coming back to stage use everything and then kind of dodge around here. to get back to stage, and that's very predictable. So don't let yourself get caught out using dodge as a jump kind of here towards the edge. It is a useful last jump to be able to reach the stage sometimes, but because of that predictability you may want to mix it up. And one way you can actually maximize using dodge, say for instance you get hit out here, you can dodge first, use your options, and then dodge again by the time you actually get back to the stage. But just be careful with that, because if you use your dodge needlessly when you aren't in any immediate danger, then by the time you actually do get into a situation where you'll need it and you find you don't have it, then you might end up worse off than if you saved it. So just be careful with that. But you can, just something to think about, you can actually use it multiple times if you think about the cooldown rather than just saving it till last. The next thing I'm going to show you isn't really an option to get back to stage, it's more of a movement option, but it can save you off stage, and that's fast falling. If you see, I just let the character fall. It's very slow, but if you hold down, direction key down, you see you fall quite a bit faster, and what that means is you can actually outpace ground pounds. So say you're on the edge and you're being ground pounded, you can quickly fall down like that rather than floating, because if you just float down then the ground pound will catch up with you and you may get KO'd. So being able to fast fall and just keeping that in your sort of movement toolkit to be able to save yourself can help you a lot off stage. This next bit of movement tech is very important, so make a note of it, because this is going to help with your offstage game as well as just general movement game, and that's chase dodging. So what's the chase dodge? Well, if you immediately dodge after landing a hit, well, it doesn't have to be immediate, but there is a brief window to immediately input a direction and dodge. You can basically fly, and you saw there it did travel a little bit further than a regular dodge would allow. So using this really can help to maximize the distance that you can travel with a single dodge. So if you can land that hit, it is worth doing to give you that extra distance, especially when you're trying to get back from off stage. And you can land that hit on your opponent, or maybe even on your teammate if you've got team damage on. So the directions that you can chase dodge in, as you saw there, you can do it up. You can also chase dodge in the direction you're facing. The idea there is the direction you're facing will be the direction your opponent gets hit to, so therefore you're chasing them. So you can chase dodge across. You can also chase dodge diagonally in the direction you're facing. You can chase dodge down, and you can chase dodge diagonally down as well. And then the other part of the name is dodge. So how does this interact with your dodge cooldown? Well, a chase dodge doesn't need a dodge to work. So say for instance I use my dodge, I can then chase dodge even though I should be on cooldown. I use my dodge here, I shouldn't get it back for another 3 seconds, but then I can do a chase dodge. So yeah, it doesn't need a dodge, you only need to hit them to be able to do it, but it will actually take a dodge, so you will be on cooldown after using it. So you see here, I can't dodge until it comes back off of cooldown. You can actually do it more than once though, so chase dodge up, stall, I can do it again, but I can't do it a third time. I did try it there, you'd have to touch the stage again before you can do a third one. So far we've learned that in order to get your jumps back, or recoveries back, you're going to have to touch the stage or the wall. And it's true that that does give you your 4, but another way to get 1 jump back without having to touch the stage is by being hit. So say I use all of my options just like that, the bot hits me, I've now got 1 jump back, Now my resume key is the same as jump, so you'll see me do it immediately when I press X. Just jump there. You can also do it as a recovery. So if I press my heavy key, you can see I just did a recovery there. The only way this works is if you have used all 4 jumps that you get. As soon as you then get hit again, you get 1 back, and that can continue on forever. If you keep getting hit, you keep getting 1 more jump back. So another little bit of movement tech is actually using certain attacks for their inbuilt movement. So just using unarmed, you have down air. This is a really good tool because it covers quite a fair amount of horizontal distance quite quickly. It does also make you go down quite quickly, so it's only really best used if you are kind of fairly high up, or if you have options to get back up again. But it does mean you can cover some basically a bit further distance than if you were to just kind of fall in that direction, and it's quicker as well, so it can speed things up. If you aren't planning on spending that long off stage, you can kind of down area and get back in a little bit quicker. But it's not just unarmed. Some weapons have some really good aerial attacks. You're gonna have to change the legend for this part. If I get literally anything which happens to be with Onyx, you can do a side air with cannon. You can do gauntlets as well, have the side air property. There are a couple of weapons that you can have a side air with inbuilt movement in that really help you to get back to the stage. So definitely maximising using those where possible, rather than jumps, rather than recovery, rather than dodge. And something you can also do is some gravity cancel SIGs as well. So for instance, if we look at Rayman just for example, on the axe, the side SIG travels quite a fair distance. So if we were out here, we can use a dodge to travel all that distance, which is quite far for a dodge. It works with various legends. A lot of side SIGs have this property. Reno as well, just another example. I think both weapons, you got a fair bit of distance on that, so you can definitely use that off stage to basically maximize the distance of a dodge to be able to get back to stage again. And just while we're on the topic of movement, the actual speed stat of the legend itself is going to be quite important. And that's because the legend's speed determines how far they travel horizontally for the same amount of distance fallen vertically. So compare Artemis and Queen Nai, for example. You're going to have a lot better time off stage with Artemis because Artemis is able to travel further horizontally. This next part is going to be really important to make a note of if you're playing off stage, and that's Wallslip. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with it. You're playing off stage, edge guarding, being edge guarded, the exclamation marks start coming out, and then the sweat beads come out, and then you just can't jump, or it seems like you can't jump again. What's going on there? Well, wall slip is if a player performs 9 air jumps, wall jumps or recovery attacks without hitting an opponent, being hit or touching the ground, they will not be able to perform air jumps, recoveries or dodges until they touch the ground again. So just be careful, making sure that you're not returning to the wall every time. Make sure that you're getting back to the stage before using 9, or you can get hit to get a jump back, or you can land a hit yourself to get a chase dodge. Make sure that you're using options to get back to the stage. It's alright to spend a little bit of time off stage, but you don't want to be constantly going back to the wall, because then Wallslip will activate and then you will very likely fall and get KO'd because of it. At this point I just thought it would be useful to show you some pro play of some of the things I've just spoken about. So pay attention to Snowy's use of jumps after being hit, because you get a jump back, and also gravity cancel signatures.
is trying to answer back, but once Jetbean gets a reward on hit, if he jumped up into that side to win connect, and he's going to be able to get back in. He has plenty of ranges with his mobile signatures, but I don't know if he's going to get back to this one because he's going to get covered.
Goodness. Jetbean is working so hard to finish the stock off of Snow.
So this starts in the air, Snowy gets hit, uses his dodge, then uses a jump as a recovery. He gets hit, so he has a jump back, uses it as a recovery, and then by this point the dodge comes back, so he uses it as a gravity cancel and still has a jump because he got hit. Has another jump because he got hit, has another jump here, uses it as a recovery. Dodge is also off cooldown again, so he uses it as a gravity cancel signature. Uses another recovery there, dodge again comes back off cooldown, gets the wall touch. So, for the next part of this video, we're going to be covering the important do's and don'ts in applying the skills that we've just learned. So how do we take these basic offstage skills and really apply them to be able to maximise offstage gameplay? Well, one very important thing not to do is to panic use your options. So what do I mean by that? Well, say you hit someone off stage, they use everything they've got, jump, dodge, recovery, all of it. Sweat beads come out, they might not be very damaged either. They've wasted everything, potentially to cover just a small space that 2 jumps would have managed to cover just like that. What's the danger there? Well, all it takes is 1 ground pound here, and well, you saw what happened when I was trying to come back when I used everything. Sweat beads come out. I get hit at that point, I've got 1 jump come back from being hit, and if I'm all the way down here, well, that 1 jump didn't get me back up. So not using all of your options when you don't need to is a very important, it's a very simple but important detail to make sure that you're doing. Make sure you're not panic using every option you have just to cover a small space. If it only requires a couple of jumps, only use 2 jumps, don't use all of them. Again, very simple, but this can help you. Just imagine that by the time you get back to stage you are going to be hit again. Don't leave yourself without anything else to get back. And just tagging on to that point, the main reason people panic use options off stage is because really it's because of a lack of confidence, and that lack of confidence is coming from the fact that they don't know what options they've got left. And well, how do you know what options you've got left? Well, really you need to understand what the total options are, which we've covered already, and make sure you're starting to, if you're not already, make sure you're starting to keep a mental note of what options you've used. I'm not saying you have to count 1, 2, 3, etc. like that, but just making sure that you know if you've used jumps, you don't have all of them still. Very simple point again, but what happens all too often is, you know, you're using your jumps, whatever, and then it's too late by the time you realise you've still got a dodge or a recovery left, and then you die because of it. So make sure you're keeping a note of what you still have left to be able to get back to stage with. Another reason why people might be panic using options is just because it's a habit. Maybe they've gotten into this early on and they've never really gotten rid of that habit. One way to kind of root that out is to think, well, what is the pattern? Am I using all my jumps first, and then a recovery, and then a dodge to get back to stage? Is that happening every single time you're off stage? If so, maybe think about each individual move that you're doing. So after being hit, what might happen? A weapon toss might come out, right? So a dodge might be the first thing that you should be doing to get back, to dodge the weapon toss. And then one other thing just to consider is, if you're off stage, well, what's happened? You've been hit, right? You've not gone out there by yourself. So how many options do I have at this point? Well, the answer's all of them. So am I in any particular rush? No. See, I didn't have to come back straight away because I was hit away. I had everything to get back. So just make a note of that, and you know, unless you've been jumping around and then been hit while you've been in the air, you probably have more than you realise to get back. So being able to maximise what options you do have and understanding how many you have left is really going to help when you're off stage, it's going to help you get back safely, because you're going to be able to plan a route back, knowing what you have left and what's going to work. Another thing you really need to consider is the use of recovery, because although it does function like a jump, it can be taken away from you by being hit. So just watch this. Weapon toss goes up. Well, what just happened there? You saw the stars come out, you heard that noise, right? That is called a stuffed recovery, and that's where you get hit when you're trying to do your recovery, and it means that your recovery doesn't come out. So you basically lost an option just because of the bad timing of that option. And this was one of the main things that was really holding me back off stage until I kind of learned how to time the recovery as well. That was one sort of key bit of advice that I'd never really considered before. So making sure that you aren't just spamming recovery immediately, like while you're getting hit. Like if a weapon toss is coming towards you, don't go for that heavy key at all, avoid it. Make sure that you're only doing recovery when you are in a safe space and it's not reasonable that you're going to get hit at that point, because it is essentially like having a jump taken away from you. So making sure you're only doing recovery in a spot where it's safe is really going to help you. Consider the following clip for what not to do. So far in this guide, we've learnt that you actually have more options than you may at first realise. Now, you're able to stay off stage for quite some time if you need to. You aren't in any immediate rush to get back. You have the options to stall if necessary. Now that is useful information to know, it's a useful skill, but it's really going to be the application of that that's going to be important. And the main way to apply that is to start being more patient off stage and really exercise patience as much as possible, if that's the right thing to do given the circumstances. So when you're off stage, what you're really trying to do is you're looking for the right opportunity to get back. That right opportunity might well be to just jump straight back in and not stall at all. So your opponent might not really be offering a strong edge guard, or maybe not one at all. If it's a 2v2, they might be off fighting your teammate. Well, in a situation like that, you can just come straight back in. But if that's not the case and they are looking like they're going to edge guard you, you may want to stall first. So you might want to consider spending a little bit of time out like that, away from the edge where edge guards are likely to take place, and that will just keep you safe for long enough to get back to stage when the opportunity is right. So for instance, what you'll find is a lot of players will go for a panic edge guard. So they see you're off stage, they go straight in for a ground pound or some other mindless attack. Well, that's not going to hit if you're being careful. So what you can do is wait for that to happen, then go back to stage, and now suddenly you're in the advantage because you're on stage, they're off stage. So just really finding the right time to go back to stage is one of the most important things that you can learn to do. And yeah, again, as I mentioned, this will help you counter panic edge guards. And just a little tip to help you stall even more is something you may have seen me doing in that previous clip, and that's dodging up. And that's just a little bit extra height to help you stall that little bit more, because what might happen is you're over here, you dodge in towards the stage. Well, you're going to come out of the dodge by the time you hit the wall. So if a ground pound is coming in straight down and going to hit you if you're on the wall, well, dodging around here is not really going to help. Being on the wall at all might not be the best place to be, so you might want to consider stalling even more with a dodge up. And here is Phazon just to talk a little bit more on that subject.
Best for off stage, something I kind of have a bad habit of. I shouldn't even say kind of. If it is even in question, I definitely do. Dodging like back to stage like that, like not faking your opponent out ever. Because if they know you have to go back to stage, it can be worth to like dodge away, especially if you have higher speed, right? Like say they know I'm gonna do that, I dodge like up, or I dodge like up and away to kind of bait them.
Now we're going to have a look at some more pro play, and this time it's Pavelski who's using an extreme stalling tactic by using his dodge as a gravity cancel.
Uh-oh, yeah, okay. Does he? Wait,
Oh,
no way.
No.
So Pavelski slides off here, so he hasn't used any aerial options when he gets hit. The first one he uses is the dodge here to stall as a gravity cancel. He jumps and does a recovery, then does another jump here, and then another jump to push him closer to the stage, by which point the dodge comes back and he's able to touch. So because he did that dodge first, he was able to get it back in time again. Something else that we can learn from watching Pavelski play is using the stage as cover.
Pivot, weapon though, doesn't make it over the corner.
Yeah, he wanted it to. Whoa! Oh, no!
Basically, Pavelski realises that he has options to spare, so he's able to sort of hang around under the stage and avoid the weapon toss. Being able to use the stage to cover yourself is quite useful, but the extreme stalling is not really something you're going to see very often in your own games. So how can you actually apply something and use stalling in practice in your games? Well, what I'm about to show you now is just a little bit of a clip from a game that I got, which highlights a few offstage tips. So as I'm being hit away here, my recovery is to the wall, but I first go down to a low point where it's safe, but I don't then immediately go to the wall. I sort of stall next to it. Even the recovery I use here is away from the wall, and you see because of that it kept me safe from the D-light. My final option is to then use my dodge to get back to the wall, and this was diagonal so that it covered that space across, got me back. I wasn't in any immediate danger going to the wall there because he'd just done a D-light. I could have stalled more by doing it up. As well, in this clip you'll notice that I wait for the attack to come out first before using recovery, which creates a safer timing, as I'm less likely to be hit immediately again and it doesn't get stuffed. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at another clip that demonstrates some of these concepts. So pay attention to the timing and placement of options. So just to debrief this one, this actually starts with me initiating an edge guard, so I come in with a down air here. On my return when I do a recovery, I do so away from the wall, and that keeps me safe from that attack there. I try and dodge there, but the timing is slightly off, so the recovery does hit me into that side sig. In order to conserve options, I down air there to cover that space without using an option. I then use those options I've reserved to stall in this middle area, and I do so at a safe distance as well. You see I'm away from that side sig. The Artemis then seems to reset their edge guard, so I'm able to move in. Anticipating another attack, I do then stall again with a dodge up. After noticing this D-sig edge guard, I know I need to go low, so I use a down air there for speed in going low to the wall, and as well it helps conserve an option. At this point I also anticipate a panic edge guard. As you can see, the Artemis is coming in with a ground pound, so I move out of the way, and because the Mirage was not in an edge guard position, I was able to go straight back up to stage. When I get hit here, I actually did touch the stage, so you see I jump once here, jump as a recovery. I actually dodged to stall here, down air in. I had another jump, but I touched the stage, so I wasn't leaving myself without an option. So the next skill that we're going to have a look at applying is something else that we learned earlier, and that is chase dodging. So what do we know about chase dodging so far? Well, we know that if you can get a hit on your opponent, you can basically use your dodge to fly in a direction that you choose, and it doesn't require the dodge. As you can see, that travels quite far. It doesn't require the dodge to be performed, and that becomes very useful off stage, because if you don't have a dodge but you manage to land a hit, you can essentially add another option, a good option, because it covers a large distance. You can add it to your toolkit in order to get back to stage, which becomes invaluable when used correctly. And even if you do have a dodge, that doesn't matter because it's not wasted because you are maximizing the distance when using that dodge. Now I said that it's invaluable when used correctly. The best way to use a chase dodge is, as I've been doing here, is to chase dodge up. And the reason that is because if you consider the vertical distance that you travel upwards, you can basically get back with your options plus that from the very bottom of the stage. So it doesn't matter what's happening, even if you use a load of options, you're maybe even in sweat beads, right, all the way down here. If you land that hit down here, well then suddenly you can chase dodge this distance back up to the wall. You could be sweating basically almost in the magnifying glass at the bottom, get the hit, chase dodge up, and then you're back on the wall again. So using that, making sure you're starting to use chase dodge up, especially when you're sort of down and you're trying to get back up again, that is going to save you, and it will be the difference in many cases between surviving and not. It may even be the difference in actually winning a game. So make sure that when you're being edge guarded, you are definitely using chase dodge up or up and in to get back to the stage whenever you can. Chase dodging up doesn't just help you when you're being edge guarded, it actually helps you to do edge guards as well. So if we just have a look at this scythe clip I get here, if I don't chase dodge up at the end and I try and make it back, you see I almost get there, but I just miss out and go into the wall. Now if we try the exact same thing, but you'll see I do a chase dodge up at the end of this. Well, I don't just make it back to the wall, I make it back to the stage, so it's a lot easier. Something else that chase dodging up is very useful for is specific to Lance. So has this ever happened to you? You're playing off stage with Lance, and then your recovery hits, but it blocks the full distance of your recovery coming out, so you're kind of blocked from travelling. It kind of feels like a stuffed recovery because you don't get to use your full recovery. However, the key difference between that and a stuffed recovery is you are actually landing the hit. It's not a clash, you aren't being hit out of your attack. So because of that, you are able to chase dodge. So all too often I see people in that situation where they land their own recovery and then die because of it. So actually what you can do is chase dodge up like that. Assuming I didn't have any other options, I could have jumped because I'd only just come off the wall here, but presuming I'd been out for a little while longer than that, I'd be able to chase dodge it up again, and training mode is broken. What is going on? Well, anyway, you saw it the first time. I was able to chase dodge back up again because I got that hit. I'll just demonstrate it here again. Chase dodging up when you land a Lance recovery. If you aren't doing that already, make sure that you're sort of adding that to your toolkit if you are a Lance player specifically. Now we're going to pick up from where we left off on this clip earlier and see what else we can learn. So we start off here with me being hit by a down air. The weapon toss then comes out. It's down and across. So I move into the left to avoid that. I use a couple of jumps here to position myself below the stage for cover, but then I noticed the Nyx is going back to the wall, so that allows me to come out from underneath that cover. Their positioning makes it evident that they're about to come in for another attack, so using that opportunity I use my last option, a dodge, to get the height to Nair, which then gives me the option of a chase dodge back to stage. Even though I just used the dodge, I could still perform that chase dodge. I then do a side air here back at the stage to cover myself to allow space for me to get back without any danger. Time for more pro play analysis now, and this time it's a little clip from Egg Soup, and we're going to be having a look at how to effectively cover yourself with attacks. So what does Eggsoup get right here? Well, first of all, he uses recovery when his opponent is recovering as well, so it's safer. He uses dodge up here to stall, and then uses a nair to chase dodge, and then does another nair to cover himself. He then moves away from the wall in order to try and reverse the edge guard. Now, why is that important? Well, imagine what happens if he were to dodge diagonally up to the wall here instead of up. Well, he'd touch the wall at the second that the gyro does the ground pound, and he'd die because of it. Here, when he does a second nair, you notice he's not actually reset his jumps, he's still got sweat beads. If he had touched the wall there, again, that second ground pound attempt from the gyro would have hit him. So in both instances, not going straight for the wall and sort of covering himself, or using a method I've discussed earlier, such as stalling with the dodge up, actually saved him. The next option, which I'm going to show you how to apply, is the use of down air off stage. Now this move continues even when it's obstructed, so that means if you land it on the corner at the bottom here, you can actually clip the corner, and you see you carry on going and you end up below the stage. Now why is that useful? Well, there are two main reasons. The first one is that it's a very quick way of touching the stage. As we already learned, that is one useful property of down air. But if we specifically target the corner, it's also a useful way of quickly getting off of the stage again, off of the wall even. So normally you have to come up and touch like that and then move away, and that time that you're spent on the wall you could get hit, and using a down air off the side like this reduces that risk because you're on the wall for less time, and it resets your jumps just the same as a normal wall touch. So even though the animation of sort of being on the side of the wall like that doesn't come out, it still resets your jumps. And the other advantage of this is it positions you below the stage, which is useful for cover. So a couple of good advantages of doing that as an option to touch the stage rather than just touching the wall again and then jumping off. It's actually also very similar with ground pound. If you position and then ground pound immediately as you hit the wall, you don't really do the sliding down the wall animation, you just go straight in, and then you have all of your extra jumps that touching the wall brings you. So whether you used down air or instant ground pound on the side, you get those 3 jumps back, so the 2 jumps and the 1 recovery, and that's because it is touching the wall. If you touch the stage, obviously you get another. Now we're going to have a look at some pro play, and this is Phazon, who is using down air to clip the corner.
Pick up a little bit of team damage there. Oh, there we go, the uppercut coming through from Simba, and a ground pound. Oh! Maybe.
Is that enough? It's not enough. He can still make it. Oh, clever Phazon.
Oh,
Still not enough. You can't touch this frog.
And now we've just about wrapped up the application of skills section of the video. So what we're going to do is have a look at a couple of clips which highlight everything I've taught so far all in one, and we can see how it all fits together. So this clip actually starts with me trying to go for a little bit of a clip. It doesn't go well here because I end up falling too low. Realizing that my only option back is to get a chase dodge, I use my last option, a dodge, to get up, position myself for a falling nair, get the chase dodge up, but then immediately use the down air to clip the wall. And that's because that attack was coming out. If I hadn't, then I would have got hit. Here you see I use my recovery only in a safe space, and then I also land in a safe space again. So this clip has a lot going on in it. The first thing that happens to me, I get hit by a nair. This sends me down. Anticipating an attack, I then position myself under the stage for cover, do a side sig. I then move low to avoid being hit further. I position myself diagonally away from the wall so my recovery will take me back. I get hit again, I think that down there was a mistake. On my way back up again, I kind of stall as much as I can, but I dodge, realising I have no other options. I then down air for safety to clip the wall and then stay below the stage for cover. I then chase dodge after getting the hit. That should have been straight up, but it got me on the wall. Got hit again down, and then on my recovery here I'm away from the wall. When considering the topic of edge guarding, there's often more of a focus on what the individual actually edge guarding is doing. So maybe they're at the corner here, throwing moves out, hoping that someone recovering backstage will get hit by it. Maybe they come down to the wall, engage in a wall guard to try and secure a KO that way. There seems to be less so a focus on what to do if you're in the situation being edge guarded or wall guarded. What do you do? Well, when you're in that situation, you're being put into a position where you not only have to fight, but you have to win. Because if you lose off stage in the disadvantage, it doesn't matter what health you're at. If you know, even if you're in yellow health, if you lose, then you're going to get gimped and you lose that stock. So because of how vital it is to win that situation, win that engagement, we're going to need to know some tips and tricks to be able to pull that off, because it is basically a do or die situation when you're being wall guarded or edge guarded potentially. And that's where this video comes in. So how do you fight an edge guard and win? Well, as you've seen in the past couple of clips, the first step is to actually attack with moves that will cover yourself. However, mindlessly throwing out attacks in the hope of getting a chase dodge isn't really going to cut it. Thankfully, every single edge guard or wall guard imaginable can be countered, but we're going to need to know how to apply the skill of covering ourselves with an attack to be able to pull this off. And the skills necessary are positioning, so where are you where you attack, offstage, timing, when do you do it, and perhaps most importantly, the matchup knowledge, because that is going to actually be what drives those first two factors. So exactly where you are and what you're doing and when you do it is going to be determined by what weapon you're holding, what weapon your opponent is holding. And as well, there's a little element of reads in there as well that factors into the matchup knowledge. So maybe you see your opponent going for a certain option, you can probably expect that again, so that factors into that knowledge. So kind of four things really: timing, positioning, and those two are driven by the matchup knowledge and the reads. Just a little bit of a disclaimer on the positioning element of this section of the video. We will be discussing positioning in terms of where you need to be to attack in this sort of wall space and around. This section of the video will not be considering the necessary positioning that is required in order to get back to stage safely if you're a little bit further away. So for instance, if you need to attack and then chase dodge back to even get to the wall, well then I would recommend using the chase dodge just for safety and getting away from that situation. You will also benefit from being able to reverse edge guards, so for instance attacking and then down airing in or something like that in order to, I guess, cover yourself on your return, but your focus when you're further away is purely safety, not necessarily the fight taking place at the wall itself. That comes a little bit later, so just to avoid the confusion there, positioning is going to be just around this wall. How to actually get back with your movement is what's been discussed before this section of the video already. When I was mentioning the skills required earlier, I did list the timing and positioning first. However, we are going to be skipping those for now because, again, as I mentioned, the actual reads and matchup knowledge portions are going to be what drives those. So we're going to need to consider that first. And the matchup knowledge and reads is, I guess the best way I can describe it is like a thought process or flowchart. And it starts with understanding what your opponent is doing. So, for instance, if they have spear, I'm just going to have to use a couple of example weapons because you can't really explain it for everything. Say they have spear. If they're kind of just moving around like this when you're on the wall, well, what a spear player is often going to do, down air in like backwards like that, right? Where does that cover? Covers about here. So if you were at the bottom of the wall, are you going to get hit by that? No. What else does spear have? Ground pound, but that's slow. By that point you'll be able to fast fall and move out of the way. So what danger does spear actually pose, other than a weapon toss and maybe an unarmed follow-up? Well, it's really this top part, right? So that's where the positioning comes in. If you're playing against spear, don't be here, be down at the bottom of the wall or away, right? So that's how the matchup knowledge can give you a hint on where you need to be. So that covers off the positioning. It also covers off the timing, because if you're coming back and forth towards the wall like this, anticipating a ground pound, you can then attack at the moment you see it coming down, and you've given yourself the space by being down here, so you've got the time to react. And then again, if they were sort of moving, looking like they were going to be doing that, with that down air, well then that's a read on your opponent. So that's just one example of how you can use matchup knowledge, knowing what your opponent has to be able to do. Combine that with what it looks like they're going to do or what they've done previously in the game, and then that informs where we need to be on the wall or off stage. It also informs when we need to attack. So how are we going to actually attack and beat this edge guard? We've established a prediction for what's going to happen as the person being edge guarded with the example of spear. But how do we actually beat it? Well, are we going to be directly where the attack's coming out and trying to challenge it head on? Well, I know that Blaster's Nair has quite a long range, so we might get away with it, right? But Spear down air has a lot of range as well. Spear is just a long range weapon in general. So yes, we might win, but we also might not. Is it worth it? I guess in this instance it really depends on who gets that hit first, because both weapons kind of cover that kind of a similar-ish range. Maybe Blasters does have a slight advantage, but the point is, would you challenge something head on that's got a decent probability of them coming out better? Well, not, given how high risk, high reward the situation is. What you might be better off doing is, as I mentioned earlier, moving further away. You can use the fact that the Nair has sort of a hitbox to the side as well as up, because it's not just directly above you. You can kind of hit someone on the stage like that if you pivot it, right? But if you use that and move away and attack like that, you can hit the player while the spear is down by the side of the wall and you're here. It might be even easier to move away and side air in, right? Like that. You're hitting the space where the actual player is going to be, not where the attack is. They're attacking directly down like this. Their character is floating around here. So it would make sense for you to move into a position where you're attacking where they are and you're not in a dangerous position anymore. Okay, let's change up the example a little bit. Let's have a look at bow. So what can bow do to edge guard, or I guess more specifically wall guard? Well, as you know, they have basically one of the best ground pounds in the game, highest fixed force. But that is quite slow, so, you know, unless you're being reckless, unless you're just sat on the wall and you can't get off in time, you aren't necessarily going to get hit by that. So what I guess more experienced bow players are going to do is a down air. They're going to do this dash jump down air in, and as you can see, that covers very far down. It can even cover below, just below the wall here. Now, well, that's suddenly poses a bit of more of a threat, because if you're at the top of the wall, they can just ground pound. If you're at the bottom of the wall, they can down air. So where is safe? Well, consider the positioning that the bow player has to use to do either of those two things. So this is where a bit more of a read comes in. You know the weapon matchup knowledge, because those are the two main options that they can use. So next comes the read. If you expect them to be doing this down air, well, where do they have to be to do that? To attack you on the wall, the nature of their down air is diagonal, right? So they're going to have to be here. Well, that's different to the spear player who is here, right? So our response is going to be different, and once again, the wall guard can be countered. So even though they can cover both the top and the bottom of the wall, compared to the spear, actually you can still counter it. It's not completely hopeless just because they could take up any space on this wall. If they have to be diagonal like this, where is actually a safe zone? Well, it's here, right? The bottom right corner of this sort of square we're creating. And if we're in this position, the person edge guarding us would have to position themselves directly above us to get this edge guard. And in a situation like that, well, say we've got blasters, I mean, we could go with a hard read on Nyx and do an N-sig, right? Or we could just nair. Or again, we could side air away, or like that. Maybe we could move up and side air in like that. If the bow down air is going to be hitting below us, we could suddenly move up at the point that they jump down. So either of those options, again, is putting yourself into the situation where you aren't in danger necessarily. You're moving away because you've got a read on where they're going to go, and you're attacking where they're going to be, not confronting the attack itself head on. One trick for playing off stage is to jump on and off of the wall like so. It's a jump and then move away to fall off the wall. And while you're doing this, you're actually minimizing the time you're spending on the wall itself. See, you're immediately hopping away, but even though it's minimizing this time on the wall, you're staying in the same general area, which means that you're best placed for responses, but it also means you're not stuck on the wall where you're more liable to be hit. So your increased movement makes you harder to be hit, and as well, since you're already agile moving around, you're always going to be not far from being in a better position to be able to move away and counter the edge guard. So if a ground pound comes straight down here, you're already probably moving away at that point, and then you can attack. But yeah, you have to be careful of Wallslip, as you saw here. The exclamation marks were coming out. So if you do use this tactic, make sure you are returning to stage so as not to activate the Wallslip. This jumping can actually work as a bait for an edge guard as well, and this is likely due to the fact that it creates a pattern, a very predictable pattern of movement, and that gets picked up on by the player edge guarding you. And their natural response is then to time the ground pound, or maybe a down air or some attack for when you're at the wall. So some tricks to try here: if you're jumping back and forth like this, you might want to consider jumping off the wall as well. And then you saw there, I actually ended up in a different position. Even though it looked like I was going to go back down again because I hit the wall, I actually then go up. And you see, if I jumped as the ground pound came up, then suddenly I'd be in a good position to side air here and punish. So jumping instead of falling could be a useful mix-up. And then another little tip for this section is also just mix up your timing. If your opponent is trying to ground pound, you don't want to just be returning to the wall as they get there. So your timing has to ensure you're leaving the danger zone at the time the attack comes down. Movement in and out of the wall, or movement when you're getting close to the wall, maybe from returning from further away, is quite a unique situation in the sense that you aren't actually in great danger from falling by your own hand. If you are quite far off stage, that is true. You need to focus on the options you're using in order to make it back. But as you get within one jump or so, that focus really changes to being the opponent. The danger isn't the distance you need to travel, it's what's going to happen once you get that bit closer. And when you get to this sort of one jump or two jump sort of wall area, you hardly need to look at your own legend. In fact, you can just keep them in the corner of your eye, because you know that one jump will get you back onto the wall. So because of that, you can take the opportunity to focus more on what your opponent is doing. I know a lot of players will just look at their own character on the screen. I used to do that a lot. Use this opportunity of when you're just about to get to the wall to change your focus onto the opponent, because looking at what they're going to do may be critical in the survival. If you see them coming down for an attack that you otherwise wouldn't have noticed because you were looking at your own character, well, that might save you. So just make sure that when you're not in any immediate danger, they're up here, you're about one jump away from the wall, you jump in like this. You can do that without really looking. Just keep your own character in the corner of your eye and make sure when you're returning you are giving a lot more focus to the opponent edge guarding you, because you could pick up on a hint of what they're about to do next, and that could save you. So just to summarize this section of the video, the way to beat any edge guard is first by following this flowchart. So first of all, we need to get an expectation of what your opponent may do from the weapon matchup knowledge. So for instance, blasters, they may come in with a down air like this. Secondly, you need to get a read on this specific opponent to narrow those options down. So what habits have they done so far? Were they quite hesitant to go off stage? They might not even go off stage at all. Thirdly, you then need to wait for them and watch their legend more than yours, as I mentioned earlier. Doing this will allow you to use reaction-based decisions quickly, and as well it will improve your responses specifically in terms of timing. So you might have an idea of what they're going to do, you might know exactly what they're going to do, you might know exactly what you're going to do to counter it, but it's just guessing game of when, unless you're actually looking at them. So looking at the opponent is going to be vital for knowing when to execute the counter attack. And then the fourth step is you need to move from your offstage behavior. So you're setting a pattern. As soon as you see they're moving in, you then need to change that pattern, move away to a position where you're not going to be in the hitbox, but to a position where your attack will hit where they're going to be. And that is the 4 steps to completely countering any edge guard. As we've seen, you can counter any edge guard through your movement, options, and the timing and placement of those options. So if any edge guard can be countered, then what do you do as the person edge guarding? How can you secure a KO off stage against a good player? Well, we can learn a little bit about how to play off stage by analysing on stage gameplay. In neutral on stage, who wins the engagement the majority of the times? So when we're in neutral, that gets broken, and who gets that hit? Well, it's not the person generally who attacks first, unless the person they're attacking is reckless. Often what you'll see happen is someone makes a mistake. Maybe that's their attack, their dodge, their movement, or the timing of one of those options. You know, they go for something, it doesn't quite hit, and then the opponent's able to come in with a punish while their move is still coming out. So often when people go for SIGs, you'll see someone come in with an attack. Neutral is therefore waiting to punish. Now, the same applies here. Even though it's offstage, it's no different. The player edge guarding, so the one coming down and, you know, attacking the person off stage, is generally the first person to attack or to make a move. That is the assumption that allows us to counter any edge guard, because before we were just basically waiting on them. So in order to outplay a skilled player who is off stage and get the KO on them, we need to let them make the mistake and then punish them. So how do we do this then? It might sound counterintuitive, but to effectively edgeguard someone, we need to first not edgeguard them, in that we throw their timing off by not attacking straight away. So you may see people sort of almost get ready to attack, but then not do it. What I've noticed is simply moving over the corner, like this, being in this position, not falling like that, but being around here. Being there forces your opponent who off stage to do something. So they'll either panic and attack, or they change their movement. As we saw earlier, they might be doing this and then they might move away. They do one of those things in response to you moving over the corner, because they anticipate that attack coming out. A player throwing an attack off stage creates a temporary problem, right? The edgeguard countering process relies on finding a solution to that problem. So what we can do instead is not create a situation that can be countered, but create a possibility of attacking them. Create that possibility of attacking them. In other words, we need to threaten with the movement. And as I mentioned, when we move above them at a safe distance for us, they will feel the need to adjust something, and that's when you can attack. For instance, the player may exhaust options as a result of the threat, and then when they come back to stage, it's an easy gimp. So far in this guide, I've shown you how to counter any edge guard, all kind of revolving around this wall space. Now, it is true that the wall is pivotal to offstage, because you're going to need to get back to it at very least to get the jumps back. However, this doesn't explain how to actually fight in the offstage space without returning to stage. So we are going to have a little bit of a consideration of that now. And just to start off with that, one thing is still going to be true playing actually off stage compared to playing on the wall, and that is what the first step in the flowchart was, and that was to be aware of your opponent's options, right? You aren't going to just need to be aware of your opponent's options here. You're going to really need to know them at all times, because of the necessity to be able to turn situations around and not be caught off guard because of how high risk, high reward it is. You need to be aware of your opponent's edge guard options and their patterns of movement, including how they approach the wall. Even if they aren't actually getting to the wall that second, how are they going to get there? So, for instance, as we've covered earlier, a scythe player is above. They're probably going to come in diagonally for an attack like that. Scythe by nature is diagonal, which also means if they're recovering, their recovery has to come in diagonally as well, and that information can help us when we consider what options we have to basically counter that. The key way to play offstage, or in the offstage space, is actually going to be very similar to onstage. We need to play neutral in the same sense that we would on stage, obviously without the safety of the wall. And the way you do that typically is, as I mentioned earlier, you'd use movement, dodges, attacks, and spacing to try and force a mistake out of your opponent. You'd also maybe throw your own attacks out to see it, try and get one to land, but doing so in a careful way that you aren't going to get punished. And in the same way, fighting off stage is like that. However, there's kind of another dynamic as well, and that's blind spots becomes a little bit more prevalent. So one way to play on stage, if you're kind of jumping around, moving in and out next to someone, you might try and position yourself away from where they can attack you, but you're constantly giving a threat of attacking them. Same thing off stage. Can you find a blind spot almost where someone is going to kind of struggle to be able to play against you off stage, and then because of that are you able to fight them or at least pose a threat the entire duration of the offstage engagement. So one example would be with Scythe. Scythe can hit straight down with ground pound, but it's a very uncommon move. So actually staying right underneath Scythe is kind of a bit of a blind spot, and you can really get away with some stuff unarmed. Watch this following clip. So this starts off with me getting hit away off stage. I fast fall here to avoid being hit again. They reset the edge guard. I stall. I continue stalling and that avoids the side of there. I then down air to the wall because I see the arc moving to the wall. I then move away to avoid where the Scythe down air is going to come in. I then fast fall here to maintain my position below the next player here. I then stay below them as they jump. I jump up and do a recovery to move them out of the way to make it safe for me to return back to the wall. And just as a consideration of their options, at this moment when I'm below them, they can either do Nair or Sair practically, and I'd have to cross one of those lines, so I choose to stay underneath them instead. You see they were waiting for me, but I hit from underneath where it was safe. When I mentioned blind spots earlier, this is not simply a direction that the opponent cannot or often does not attack in. This is also a consideration of distance. So are you staying a safe distance from where their attacks can hit, but your attacks are still posing a threat? Another consideration is, doesn't necessarily have to be a blind spot at all, it's just, is the weapon comfortable in punishing from that direction, or do they feel the need to reposition themselves? So avoiding their attacks is kind of a shallow way of looking at it, or avoiding where they can attack, but avoiding how they like to attack is really the key, and it's difficult to explain, which is why I'm showing you these clips, just to kind of put it into the context of some gameplay. And kind of one last point on this topic is, as I mentioned before, considering how your opponent moves also helps you edge guard them. So your opponent is off stage using options, you see they're not using their recovery, and then finally they use the recovery, maybe only just reach the bottom of the wall. Well, if you're unarmed, you aren't in any danger here, right, if they're going to do a recovery. I mean, you may be in danger of your own hand, but say you're in this space, you aren't going to get hit by a recovery that's coming diagonally up to the corner like this. So what you can do is wait, and then do you like ground pound them? Just as an example of how to punish that unarmed, as soon as they hit the wall, then you can do like ground pound from behind, because you know that Scythe recovery is diagonal, meaning it hits above and in front of it. So you aren't going to want to be in either of those two directions. It would be pointless to ground pound and potentially get sucked into it. So waiting and attacking from behind will help you. Another trick to playing off stage is to be aware of the consideration of height of the moves that you're using. So for instance, if you're spamming jump like this, is there a good place to jump again against an opponent edge guarding? Probably not, right? Because if you jump there, when suddenly you're above the stage, you could get hit. You are trying to safely get back any way you need to. So consider how high you jump when deciding where to jump. Does your jump place you above this wall space and put you in danger of being hit? You may want to consider jumping and then stalling, and then you see jumping at a point where it lands you in a safer space. So consider how high the options you use are going to take you. So you don't really want to peek your head above the wall like this if you're in risk of being edge guarded. And likewise, if an attack's coming down and you're trying to return, you saw how I just got to the wall there because I didn't just spam jump. I jumped, fell a little, and then jumped again because I considered the height I could cover. Another way to kind of control the height that you travel is with exhausted recovery. I'll just put on screen now the explanation for that. It's basically where you've used a recovery before, you do basically a shorter one if you use a recovery again. And a recovery like that can also help you off stage in this capacity.
That's 2 huge dubs for Simple on the fact that he avoided getting ripped off stage multiple times when he had to lead. The ground pound comes through. Pavelski doing his best. He does sneak in the wall touch. That was nice.
So after Simple hits Pavelski down here, he stalls vertically, uses the weapon toss for cover, thinking that that will save him. I think a bit of a mistake there. He does end up getting hit. But then in true Pavelski fashion, you see he dodges first and then hangs around under the wall for safety. What he does next is interesting. You see he jumps at the perfect distance to just get the bottom of the wall. So he jumped in the right position so that he wouldn't go higher than he needed to, probably because he knew Simple was going to do something like that D-like ground pound. The next part of this video is my offstage weapons tier list. And the way I've made this tier list is with the consideration of several factors. So this isn't just how good weapons are at edge guarding, how good they are at fighting edge guards, how good they are at survival. It's actually all of those things together. So what might happen is if one weapon is good at particularly one skill, but then weak in others, that might cancel out and you'll see it sort of in the middle of the tier list maybe. So ones that are higher up are generally speaking better at everything. I haven't split it out. It is kind of a one generic tier list for all of the offstage skills, and that really explains what I've considered as well for each weapon when deciding the placement. So the main factors are how good at edge or wall guarding is it, so how good are the options for covering and making a threat, how good are the options for fighting such an edge guard, so covering yourself and being useful to catch a chase dodge. How, like, so for instance, like Blasters now is quite good coverage above you, good for getting a chase dodge. The third consideration is inbuilt movement. So does the weapon have any good attacks, such as like a side arrow or a good recovery, which allows it to actually move quite far compared to when you're using another weapon. And as well, how good are the attacks themselves? So do the attacks maybe hit the opponent down, which is good for a gimp, or are they good at reversing edge guards? Those are the 4 main considerations for each weapon. And just one of the final parts in the video, I'm actually going to throw it over to you guys. After everything you've learned in this video, it's time for you guys to have a look at some offstage gameplay, a final few pro clips, and analyze what went right yourself.
Top 3. You're on the podium straight up.
Oh! Wait a minute!
He made
the option!
Ooh, he can barely. He touched the wall. He touched the wall. He got his jumps back. Again, he got his jumps back.
Yes. You see that touch, that cloud, as soon as he touches the wall, that resets all the jumps.
That one. He knew to drift away. He knew Pavelski was going to be going for that gravity cancel side light reset. And that would have been the end of him, for sure. That would have been another KO for Pavelski. Oh, still alive. Ducks underneath the weapon throw. Ducks underneath another weapon throw. He's still in.
The nice move by Lamp. Oh, he did it again. He did it again. That was a nice move, and he even pivoted it too, which works really well for it. No, he's going to do it unarmed.
Experience actually taking all...
Hi everyone, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it if you made it this far through. And just as a little reward, here are some codes on the screen now, including 4 weapon skin codes for weapons which are pretty useful off stage. So good luck on getting one of those. And I really hope you found this guide useful, even if it is, you know, just one thing that you took from it. I hope you can take that away and improve your offstage gameplay. But just remember, this guide is not skill in and of itself. You can only benefit by taking the time to apply what I've taught you. And importantly, don't give up. You know, it might take time to apply these things, but just remember that nobody ever improved or ranked up by giving up. So I know with this guide you will be able to go away and improve your offstage gameplay. So please do take the time. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you see the benefits of being able to use some of this information in your own games. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.